Hello everyone, welcome to my update US gossip channel. The tension was palpable in Christine Brown's home as she paced the kitchen, her hands nervously wringing a dish towel, her mind replaying the news that had shaken her to her core. Earlier that morning, she had received word that her daughter, Michaelty Padron, had officially moved to North Carolina, choosing to start fresh with her own family, and Christine had felt a tight knot of despair settle in her stomach, one she couldn't shake no matter how deep she tried to breathe. And now, as if fate had decided to test her resolve further, her only son, Paydon, had dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through her already fragile composure. He, too, was planning to leave Arizona, potentially permanently, and move closer to North Carolina, not just to be near his sister, but to live near Janelle Brown, a sister wife who had once been a partner in raising her children and now loomed in Christine's thoughts with an almost menacing sense of encroachment. Christine had tried to mask her feelings when Paydon had broken the news, keeping a soft, measured tone, asking the question she knew would betray her disappointment: why? Why does he need to move as well? But her voice carried an edge she couldn't entirely hide, a tremor of hurt underlying each word. Paydon, sensing the crack in his mother's facade, had explained softly, almost apologetically, that his decision stemmed from a desire to heal the invisible wounds left by Garrison's death. He had lost a best friend, a brother in spirit, and he wanted to be near someone who had also endured the unthinkable, someone who understood the void left by a child lost too soon. Christine's heart had clenched at the truth in his words. Of course she understood the need for connection, she wanted him to have support, but the sting of loss intertwined with a sense of rejection made her feel unmoored, adrift in the sudden emptiness that seemed to have taken over her home. Paydon's explanation that he wanted to stay close to Janelle, to Maddie, and to Janelle's children had landed like a hammer on her chest, the words making her feel simultaneously proud of his empathy and resentful of the silent implication that he was choosing Janelle's household over his own mother's presence, that he was, in some way, leaving her behind. She had smiled at him, nodded, even given a reassuring pat on the shoulder, but inside, the storm raged, a torrent of frustration, sadness, and raw maternal instinct that she could barely keep contained. Later, she confided in her husband, David Woolley, her voice barely above a whisper: "I just feel like half of them are gone already. It's like they're all picking Janelle over me." Her words trembled with the weight of longing and the ache of a mother watching her children drift farther away. Christine couldn't help but replay the moments in her mind when she and Janelle had been inseparable, coordinating birthdays, school events, and family gatherings, raising children side by side with a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect. Now, it seemed as though that partnership had eroded under the weight of distance and circumstance, leaving her to navigate the choppy waters of her family's evolving dynamics largely on her own. Her thoughts spiraled back to a particularly jarring encounter with Janelle, a conversation she couldn't forget and one that had planted a seed of irritation she hadn't been able to shake. In that discussion, Janelle had casually, almost flippantly, mentioned that she would be close to all the grandchildren, that they would be near her home, and Christine had felt a flash of something she rarely admitted aloud: jealousy. In her confessional, she had admitted, "I was thinking to myself, you shut up right now." That was the moment where I felt like slapping her. The admission had been shocking even to herself, the rawness of the emotion spilling over in a way that was uncharacteristic for the normally composed and strategic Christine. She had questioned internally, bitterly, how Janelle could say such a thing, how she could even entertain the idea of seeming to claim something so sacred as her grandchildren's proximity, something Christine had always believed was hers to protect and nurture. She had held on to that resentment, feeling it gnaw at the edges of her consciousness, mingling with the sadness of her children's physical absence and the realization that the family she had once known so intimately was shifting, changing in ways that made her feel powerless. As she confided in David, she admitted the complicated truth. She knew she had hurt Janelle's feelings at times, but now, in light of recent events, it seemed they were both drifting apart, doing things separately rather than together, their once intertwined lives now moving along parallel but distant tracks. "I want to be more in charge of my business now," she had told David, the words carrying an unspoken acknowledgement that she needed to reclaim some aspect of control, some domain where she could assert herself and her independence. David had suggested, gently but pointedly, that perhaps their dynamic had become competitive, that each step they took individually was a reflection of their unspoken rivalry, and Christine had nodded in agreement, understanding that competitiveness often came wrapped in the guise of self-preservation, particularly when one felt the familial sands shifting beneath her feet. She had reflected on the past few months, the whirlwind of changes, the departures of her children, the emotional turbulence that had accompanied Garrison's death, and she had realized with a mixture of sadness and resolve that she needed to find a way to navigate this new reality without losing herself in the process. Christine's mind had wandered to memories of when the children had been younger, when they had run through the house, voices echoing down the halls, laughter filling every corner, and she had felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of those days, for the certainty of a time when she had been at the center of their lives. Now, with Paydon moving away, the house felt emptier, the echoes of past joys mingling with the silence of absence, a silence that seemed to press down on her shoulders with a tangible weight. She had thought about the countless ways she had tried to maintain connection, the texts, the calls, the visits she orchestrated, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the pull toward Janelle's home, toward North Carolina, represented a choice her children were making, a subtle but undeniable preference that left her feeling sidelined in her own family narrative. Christine's internal dialogue had been relentless, her emotions shifting like a storm at sea, at times sorrowful, at times irate, at times consumed by the almost reflexive urge to lash out, not in anger toward her children, but in response to the perceived encroachment of Janelle's presence, the quiet assertion of influence that Christine felt was undermining her role as mother and matriarch. The memory of that conversation with Janelle replayed repeatedly, the words about being close to all the grandchildren ringing in her ears with a resonance that bordered on accusatory, as though each syllable was a judgment on Christine's ability to maintain closeness with her family. She had shared with David, her voice barely restrained, that the thought of Janelle seemingly taking ownership of proximity to her grandchildren had been infuriating, almost visceral in its effect. "I wanted to tell her off, but I didn't," she admitted, "and part of me still wants to." She acknowledged the complexity of her feelings, the simultaneous love for her children and the irritation she felt toward Janelle, and recognized that these conflicting emotions were natural, human, and difficult to navigate under the public scrutiny that came with being on sister wives. David had listened, offering comfort where he could, gently reminding her that feelings of jealousy or competitiveness did not negate the deep love she had for her family, that they were simply part of the evolving landscape of relationships, particularly in a blended family with so many intertwined connections and shared histories. Christine had nodded, knowing he was right, yet still feeling the sting, the subtle but persistent ache of watching her children gravitate toward spaces and people beyond her immediate reach, toward Janelle and the life she had built in North Carolina. She reflected on the myriad changes that had occurred, the children growing older, making independent choices, grieving losses in their own ways, and forging bonds that sometimes excluded her presence, all of which made her feel both proud of their autonomy and wistful for the closeness she had once taken for granted. She pondered how these shifts mirrored her own evolution, the increasing focus on her business and her personal pursuits, the recognition that she could not control the choices of her children, and the realization that perhaps, in stepping back from the minutiae of managing every aspect of their lives, she could create a space where relationships could be nurtured without the constant pressure of proximity. Still, the rawness of the moment lingered, the memory of wanting to slap Janelle a testament to the depth of her emotions, a stark reminder of how personal and fiercely protective Christine could be when it came to her family. She thought about the ways in which her relationship with Janelle had transformed, from partnership to a more distant, occasionally competitive dynamic, and how both women were navigating this new terrain with caution, awareness, and sometimes unspoken resentment. Christine admitted to herself that while she wanted to maintain support and connection, she also craved acknowledgement, recognition, and respect for her role as mother, as matriarch, and as a woman whose influence had once been at the center of her children's lives. The emotional roller coaster of the past months, Paydon's impending move, Michael's relocation, the grief over Garrison's death, and the subtle tensions with Janelle, had left her simultaneously vulnerable and determined, aware of the fragility of family bonds and the necessity of redefining relationships to accommodate growth, change, and individual autonomy. As she walked alongside David, the weight of these realizations settling over her like a heavy shawl, she resolved to find balance, to nurture connections without smothering them, to express her love without letting jealousy dominate her actions, and to assert her place in her family's life with both grace and resolve. And yet, the memory of that one incendiary comment from Janelle, the casual remark about being close to all the grandchildren, remained lodged in her consciousness, a vivid flash of emotion that reminded her of the sometimes unexpected ways in which love, grief, loyalty, and rivalry could intertwine, shaping her experience as a mother, a sister-wife, and a woman striving to navigate a complex and ever-changing family landscape. In that moment, Christine understood that her feelings of wanting to slap Janelle were not rooted in malice but in the profound vulnerability and intensity of her love, a reflection of the deep investment she had in her children's lives and the natural, human response to perceived threats to her maternal role. She knew that in the end, the path forward required patience, understanding, and a careful balancing act, honoring the autonomy of her children, respecting the bonds they formed with others, and continuing to cultivate her own sense of identity, purpose, and fulfillment, even as the landscape of her family evolved in ways she could not fully control. And so, as the episode drew to a close, viewers were left with a Christine Brown who was raw, real, conflicted, and fiercely devoted, a mother confronting the pain of change, the sting of distance, and the challenge of maintaining love, loyalty, and connection amidst the shifting sands of family life, all while navigating the delicate dance of coexistence with a sister wife whose presence both comforted and challenged her in equal measure.